There is an implicit contract offered by a place like the White Lotus. It promises a temporary reprieve from the laws of the ordinary world, a pristine, sun-drenched sanctuary where the anxieties of life can be checked at the door along with the luggage. But from its opening moments, Mike White's masterful series makes it clear that this contract is fraudulent. The resort is not a sanctuary. It is a petri dish. It is a beautifully curated, hermetically sealed environment where the dysfunctions of its wealthy guests are not escaped, but amplified, cultivated, and studied under a relentless satirical microscope. And as the series has evolved, one particularly dark specimen has been placed at the center of this experiment, a theme that has grown from a subtle atmospheric toxin into the show's most explicit and challenging obsession: the taboo of incest. This is not a fleeting plot point designed for simple shock. It is a deliberate, recurring motif that serves as the series' dark heart. It's a thematic fixation that Mike White uses to ask a profoundly uncomfortable question. What happens to the human soul when all external constraints are removed? In a world of absolute privilege where money can erase consequence and social circles shrink to the size of a family trust, what moral boundaries are left to violate? The show argues with chilling consistency that the ultimate transgression is not external, but internal. It is the family, the bloodline, turning in on itself to consume, corrupt, and possess. To truly understand this obsession, we must begin where it all began, not with a physical act, but with a psychic sickness festering in the oppressive Hawaiian humidity of Season 1. Season 1. A diagnosis of moral squalor. Season 1 is the crucial diagnostic chapter in this overarching story. The incestuous undercurrents within the Mossbacher family are entirely psychological, which makes them, in some ways, even more insidious. Mike White isn't showing us the crime itself. He's showing us the perfect conditions that breed the criminal impulse. He pathologizes the modern, ultra-wealthy nuclear family as revealing it as a self-contained, self-referential moral universe on the verge of collapse. Consider the patriarch Mark Mossbacher. His identity is shattered by the revelation that his father led a secret gay life and died of AIDS. For Mark, this is not a crisis of compassion, but a crisis of lineage. His bloodline, the very source of his patriarchal identity and pride, now feels tainted. This sends him into a spiral of hypermasculine overcompensation. The obsessive working out, the awkward attempts to bond with his son, all of it is a desperate effort to purify a legacy he perceives as corrupted. This obsession with the purity of the family line is the foundational logic of incest taboos throughout history, particularly among royalty. It is the impulse to insulate the family from the outside world, to control the narrative, and to preserve a fantasy of genetic superiority. Mark's crisis introduces this theme of insularity and corruption from the very start. Then there is the season's most complex and unsettling dynamic, the relationship between Olivia Mossbacher and her friend Paula. Theirs is a portrait of suffocating intimacy that transcends friendship and enters the realm of psychological domination. She does not see Paula as a separate individual. She sees her as an extension of her own identity, an accessory to her own life. She co-opts Paula's intellectualism, monitors her interactions, and is pathologically incapable of accepting her independent desires. Her ultimate sabotage of Paula's relationship with the native Hawaiian staffer, Kai, is a violent act of reabsorption. It is a brutal, calculated maneuver to drag Paula back into her orbit, to punish her for the sin of having a life that was not centered on Olivia. This is not mere jealousy. It is a refusal to honor the boundary of another person's soul. It is a form of psychic vampirism, a violation of selfhood that operates on the same disturbing logic as physical incest, the belief that another person, by virtue of their proximity to you, belongs to you. And it is the matriarch Nicole who enforces the sanctity of this toxic unit. As a powerful executive, she is the family's engine, yet she clings to a performance of domestic perfection. Her constant, desperate attempts to manufacture family time are a frantic effort to reinforce the family's perimeter against the world even as it rots from within. Her final, pivotal decision to take Mark back after his infidelity, to embrace him on the beach, is the family's ultimate act of closing ranks. She chooses the familiar, contained poison of her marriage over the frightening uncertainty of a life outside of it. The institution must be preserved, the secrets kept, the perimeter sealed. In Season 1, no physical lines are crossed, but the psychic boundaries are utterly annihilated. Mike White meticulously lays out a case study of how extreme privilege creates a spiritual vacuum. Without the friction of real-world consequences, the Mossbacher family turns inward, becoming its own diseased ecosystem. This is the swampy, fertile ground from which the more literal horrors of later seasons will bloom. He had to first show us the sickness in the family's soul before he could dare to show us the sickness in the flesh. Season 2, The Taboo as Transaction and Legacy. If Hawaii was the diagnosis of a latent sickness, Sicily is the observation of the symptoms manifesting in overt and alarming ways. In Season 2, Mike White takes the psychological claustrophobia of the Mossbacher family and fractures it, exploring the theme of incestuous desire through two distinct and distinctly unsettling new lenses. The subtext begins its slow, menacing crawl into text. Here, the taboo is not just a psychic condition, it becomes a form of currency, a counterfeit performance, and a dynastic curse. First, we are given the DeGrasso men, 3 generations on an heritage tour that is in reality a tour of their own inherited moral decay. Theirs is not a story of literal incest, but of a profound dynastic sickness. The grandfather, Bert, is a creature of casual, unrepentant misogyny. His son, Dom, is a man actively destroying his own family through a sex addiction he both loathes and compulsively repeats. And then there's the grandson, Albie, who wears a cloak of nice guy sensitivity that is, in the end, just a more modern, more palatable costume for the same transactional desires that drove his forefathers. Their shared and conflicting pursuit of the sex worker Lucia creates a deeply pathological triangulation. She becomes the external object upon which the family's internal, incestuous dynamic is projected. Their desires are not just parallel, they are entangled, competitive, and ultimately contained within the bloodline. Dom is doomed to repeat the sins of his father, and Albie, for all his performative wokeness, is ultimately seduced into the same transactional worldview. It is a closed loop of toxic masculinity, where the sins of the father are not only visited upon the son, but are actively relived through him. This is the incest of legacy. A family so consumed with its own patterns of behavior that it becomes incapable of looking outside itself for a new way to be. While the DeGrassos explore the inheritance of sin, the season's masterstroke comes in the form of Quentin and his supposed nephew, Jack. Their relationship is a piece of brilliant, sustained misdirection. From their first appearance, their dynamic is calibrated to trigger our deepest sense of unease. The affection is too theatrical, the intimacy too familiar, the boundaries between them non-existent. Mike White deliberately encourages the audience to suspect the ultimate taboo, forcing us to sit in that profound discomfort for several episodes. The eventual revelation that they are not uncle and nephew, but lovers and co-conspirators in a plot to murder Tanya for her fortune, is a moment of dizzying recalibration. The horror of incest is replaced by the horror of a purely transactional void. But the trick has already worked. We have been primed to see the rot. The counterfeit taboo serves a crucial purpose. It demonstrates that in this world of the ultra-wealthy, even the most sacred of familial bonds can be hollowed out and worn as a costume. Family in Quentin's hands is not a source of love, but a tool of manipulation, a convenient fiction used to mask exploitation. The performance of incest was used to conceal a different, but equally profound moral vacuum where human beings are reduced to assets and obstacles. In Sicily, the theme of incestuous desire is cleaved in two. The De Grassos represent the prison of bloodline, a family trapped in a repeating cycle of its own corrupted legacy. Quentin and Jack represent the complete emptiness of bonds, where the language of family is just another grift. In both cases, the foundational structures of human connection are shown to be instruments of decay. The stage has now been perfectly set for the final act, a journey into a world where the subtext is finally stripped away and the taboo is allowed to step undisguised into the light.
Season 3. The Taboo Made Flesh, the Self Made God. After the diagnostic quiet of Hawaii and the performative deceptions of Sicily, Thailand is where the series' central thesis is laid bare, without metaphor and without apology. The journey into the dark heart of the incest taboo is complete. With the Ratliff brothers, Saxon and Lachlan, Mike White moves beyond insinuation and presents the transgression itself. This is not a storyline about the risk of incest or the psychology of it, but about the cold, undeniable reality of its commission. It represents a point of no return, both for the characters and for the show's unflinching critique of its subjects. The power of this storyline lies not just in the shock of the act, but in the sterile, almost casual context in which it is presented. This is not a crime of passion in the traditional sense. It is portrayed as a symptom of a much deeper, more chilling pathology, terminal boredom, and God-complex narcissism. The Ratliff brothers are the ultimate product of the White Lotus ecosystem. They're second or third generation inheritors of immense wealth, men who have never known struggle, consequence, or genuine want. The world has been a consequence-free playground for them for so long that its borders have ceased to exist. In a life where every sensation can be purchased and every experience commodified, the ultimate taboo becomes just another thrill to be consumed, the last frontier of feeling in a world where nothing truly feels real anymore. The setting of Thailand is deliberately, cruelly ironic. Westerners often project a fantasy of spiritual awakening onto this landscape, a place for yoga retreats, mindfulness, and the shedding of ego. The Ratliffs, however, are on a journey of inverse enlightenment. They are not there to shed their egos, but to indulge them to their most monstrous conclusions. Their journey into the heart of their own family's darkness is a grotesque parody of a spiritual quest. Instead of finding connection to the universe, they sever their connection to humanity, retreating into the solipsistic, self-referential world of their own bloodline. The sacredness of the location only serves to highlight the profound sacrilege of their actions. This storyline forces us to consider the ultimate expression of class insularity. The incestuous act is the physical manifestation of a family that has become a closed system. It is a unit so convinced of its own exceptionalism, so in love with its own reflection, that it sees itself as the only worthy object of desire. This is narcissism reaching its logical endpoint. When you believe your family, your name, your blood is fundamentally superior to the rest of the world, the external world ceases to be a source of potential partners and becomes merely a backdrop. The desire to merge with a reflection of oneself, a biological echo, is the ultimate act of self-worship. By making the act explicit, Mike White also forces a confrontation with the true meaning of intimacy. The sibling bond is meant to be one of the purest forms of family trust, a shared history, a built-in alliance against the world. The Ratliff story shows this sacred bond being hollowed out and perverted into something transactional and exploitative. It is the final demonstration that in this rarefied world, nothing is sacred. every human connection is subject to the corrosive pressures of wealth, power, and an all-consuming ego. It confirms that the sickness diagnosed in Season 1 was terminal. The family unit, having sealed itself off from the outside world, has finally, inevitably begun to devour itself. It is the thesis statement of the entire series, written in the most shocking and unforgettable ink imaginable. So why the obsession? Why has this single, ultimate taboo become the central, festering wound of the White Lotus? Because incest serves as the most potent and disturbing metaphor for the core subject of the show, the pathological insularity of the ultra-wealthy. Across all 3 seasons, the characters are defined by their isolation. They are sealed off from the real world by the walls of the resort, by the insulating power of their money, and by their own profound lack of empathy. Their social and moral ecosystems shrink until the only people they see as real are each other. This creates a closed loop, a feedback chamber of privilege and desire, not unlike the royal families of old Europe, who intermarried to consolidate power and preserve the purity of their bloodlines, often with monstrous results. Incest, in this context, is the biological manifestation of a social reality. It is the end result of a class that has become so inwardly focused, so obsessed with its own preservation, legacy, and gratification that it can no longer see beyond the family unit. Furthermore, in a world devoid of consequence, what is left to transgress? For these characters, money has eliminated all ordinary stakes. They can buy their way out of trouble, numb their existential boredom with luxury, and treat the service staff as invisible. In this vacuum of meaning, the only frontiers left to explore are the ones of extreme moral deviance. As audiences, we too have been desensitized. Violence, infidelity, and crime are staples of our media diet, but incest remains one of the last true taboos, one of the few things that can genuinely horrify and unsettle us. By invoking it, Mike White is not just shocking his characters out of their ennui, he is shocking us, the viewers, forcing us to confront the absolute endpoint of this moral decay. Mike White has said he enjoys making his audience complicit in uncomfortable stories. He holds up a mirror not just to the 1%, but to our own fascination with their beautiful, hollow lives. The recurring theme of incest in The White Lotus is his most powerful and challenging statement. It is the ultimate symbol of rot hiding beneath a perfect, pristine surface. It represents a world that has become so disconnected from reality, so anesthetized by privilege, that the only thing left to feel is the violation of its own flesh and blood. The promise of the White Lotus was always a lie, and the ultimate horror is that for its guests, paradise is not an escape from their problems. It is the place where they have the freedom to become their own monsters. So there it is. From the psychological claustrophobia of the Mossbachers to the counterfeit depravity in Sicily and the final explicit transgression in Thailand. Across 3 seasons, Mike White has meticulously built a case. He argues that incest is not just a shocking plot device, but the ultimate symptom of a class that has become a closed loop, a world that has begun to consume itself because it can no longer see or value anything beyond its own gilded reflection. It's a challenging, deeply unsettling, and brilliantly executed piece of social commentary that uses our most profound taboo to expose a world of profound moral emptiness. But now, I want to turn it over to you. What is your final verdict on the White Lotus's obsession with this theme? Is it a masterful, unflinching critique of the 1%, using the only taboo powerful enough to shock us anymore? Or has the show finally pushed the boundaries too far, leaning on shock value as a narrative crutch? Perhaps the bigger question is, after this, where can the show possibly go next? When you make the ultimate taboo your central theme, what boundary is even left to break? I genuinely want to read your theories and reactions, so drop them in the comments section below. If this deep dive gave you a new and perhaps darker perspective on the show, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And for more analyses that peel back the pristine layers of your favorite shows and films, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. Thank you for watching.